Welcome to the Wednesday Weed Waffle on another beautiful spring evening. I'm by the riverside again. It's and in the woods, and not just because it's one of my favourite places to be, but because it's also one of the most incredible places for abundant plants, whether they're edible or otherwise. But mainly because the plant we've come to talk about can almost always be found by the riverside. It likes wet, boggy ground, and it spreads by river really, really quickly. So, enough about me and what I like. Let's switch the camera around and get on with it. So, this is the plant we've come to talk about this evening. This is Hemlock Water Dropwort. Now, I'd like to start out by getting a little bit picky about terminology. I've seen loads of videos on social media recently talking about this being the most deadly poisonous plant in the world or the most deadly poisonous plant in Europe. And the fact is that it's not strictly true. While this is a deadly poisonous plant, I don't want to take anything away from that. There's another wild plant called wolfsbane, which contains a toxin called aconitine, which, to give some idea of how poisonous that is, 1 to 2 milligrams of aconitine ingested is enough to kill you. 1 to 2 milligrams. That's a tiny microscopic amount. This plant, Hemlock Water Dropwort, is about 100 milligrams. So I am really splitting hairs by saying that wolfsbane is much more poisonous. But actually, toxin per milligram, wolfsbane is 100 times more poisonous than this plant. Now, when I'm talking about it, I like to say, rather than saying it's the most poisonous plant, it's the most dangerous plant, because wolfsbane doesn't look very much like an edible plant. And as you can see, looking at this plant has leaves very parsley-like. Its stems are actually really celery-like. Its roots, which I can't show you at the moment, are almost exactly the same as wild parsnips. But more than all of this, and I wish I could show you with smell-o-vision, but when you break the stem or crush the leaves, it has the most delicious, sweet, amazing smell. It really does smell lovely. I would urge anyone who knows where you find some of this plant, put some gloves on, get down there and give it a good squeeze and sniff. It smells gorgeous. However, that's what makes it so dangerous. It's so similar looking to edible plants, but 100 milligrams of the toxin in it can kill you. That 100 milligrams you'd probably get from this much leaf material. So not very much at all, even less in the roots, because the poison, the toxin is concentrated much more highly in the roots. So this plant's scientific name is Oenanthe crocata, and the toxin found in this is Oenanthe toxin. So if you remember the plant name, you'll remember the toxin name. But yeah, very, very dangerous, very, very dodgy. Now, I just want to highlight, this is, as I've said, it's got a resemblance to celery, parsnip and parsley. It's from the same family as all of those three plants as well, which is what makes that family so dangerous. That being said, I'd just like to show a few things that I can show you around here right now. So this white flower down here is a pig nut from the same family, very edible, lovely and tasty. We've also got, just a little way over here, this is poison hemlock, another poisonous plant from the same family. And these big leaves here, this is common hogweed, a good edible from that family. And we have just down here some giant hogweed leaves, very dangerous plant from the same family. On a big one over here. This one is cow parsley, which is a good edible from the same family, but looks almost exactly like poison hemlock, especially when they're both smaller. So just in a small space, I can find lots of plants from the same family, including more hemlock water dropwort. And yeah, so it's not one for beginners. It's best to keep away from this family altogether. Now, a little bit about this plant that you may or may not know. There's an expression called a sardonic grin. If you can imagine pulling the widest grin you possibly can so it hurts your cheeks, and then someone forcing you to grin a little bit more. And that's a sardonic grin, not a sarcastic grin. That's something totally different. The name sardonic grin comes from ancient Sardinia. Now, this is mostly supposition. There isn't any proof for this, but it's assumed that it came from this plant. In ancient times in Sardinia, this plant was used to stupefy and poison criminals, and then they were beaten to death. And if that sounds a bit harsh, the same poison was used on elderly people when they were considered not of any use to the island anymore, and then they were pushed off high rocks. So really, really harsh. But one of the side effects of the poisoning of this is that your muscles in your cheeks and your jaw tighten so badly that they force you to have this awful rictus grin that apparently would be incredibly painful. So that's where we know a little bit about it from. But also there are supposed medicinal uses for it. There are quoted some medicinal uses for it that use the essential oils and the extracts. But I would strongly advise staying away from it as a home remedy. It's not worth the risk. It's the sort of thing that a qualified medicinal herbalist may be tempted to use, although I very much doubt it. But it's a beautiful looking plant. I believe it was in the late 80s or late 90s that a party of walkers in Scotland came into trouble with this. One of its other names is dead man's fingers. And it's called that because it likes to grow on riversides, and rivers often wash the soil away from the banks, and the roots are left exposed. And they look like fat, brown, swollen fingers. There's usually 4 to 6 of them, hence the name dead man's fingers. But as I mentioned earlier, they do look quite a lot like wild parsnips. Unfortunately, this group actually took them thinking they were wild parsnips and cooked up a bit of a campfire stew with them. Now, boiling them, that toxin, Oenanthe toxin, is actually quite unstable. So cooking it and heating it can destroy the toxin or make it less harmful. In other words, it takes longer for the effects to get you, but they do get you anyway, as this group found out. They ended up, I think all of them ended up going into hospital. Some were put into induced comas to try and help their bodies recover from this. Some had permanent organ damage. I believe 1 or 2 died, which is pretty awful. All from making an assumption about a plant looking like a thing rather than going to the extremes of positive identification. Now, with this toxin, the poisoning doesn't happen very often. In the last 100 years, there's been something like 40 or 50 cases, but it's a 70% fatality rate. So, although there haven't been many poisonings, there have been even less survivors from it. So, it really is one to be wary of and watch out for. Now, ordinarily, I don't go in for scaring and scare tactics, but this is one to really be scared of. On the other hand, I said, get yourself a pair of gloves and come and sniff some. there was a story of a research biologist in a laboratory that was overcome by the fumes of this. I'm outdoors where there's wind and there's fresh air, so I'm not worried about sniffing a bit of a plant. You may have also noticed that I did it without gloves. That's because the toxin can't get you through the skin. It can only get you through ingestion or through damaged skin, for example. Uh, but I will be making sure my hands get thoroughly washed when I get home, because even a tiny amount of this, even 1 or 2 milligrams of this, may not be enough to kill me, but it will definitely make me ill and definitely make me regret ever having done it. So that's Hemlock Water Dropwort. Um, it's about all I've got to tell you on it, other than be wary of it. It's really good to get up close and get to know the plant properly so that when you're walking around, you can see it and identify it immediately. That's where I am with this plant. I can be driving over a bridge over a river and recognize Hemlock Water Dropwort growing on the riverbanks. So yeah, even though it's deadly poisonous and it's got no use to us as foragers, it's really worth getting to know this plant quite well so you can recognize it immediately. So that's just about everything for this evening. A bit of a quick one because we haven't got any recipes and stuff to talk about. But if you've got any questions about Hemlock Water Dropwort or any members of the same family or anything foraging related at all, in fact, feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. While I think about it, there was one other thing I could tell you about this. Of course, it's not flowering just yet. When it does, it produces dense umbels of flowers. So similar to these on the cow parsley, similar to the ones on the pig nut we showed you earlier, and not entirely unlike elderflower blossoms, a different family, but they have a similar structure. And they're quite dense and about the size of my fist, and usually quite rounded early on. Just move around the side of this tree so I can show you. But down there is usually covered by the river. And I hope you can see, as well as I can from here, not only have I got a load of it under me here, but there's tons and tons of the stuff down there. Grows like absolute mad when it finds somewhere, and it will spread along this river as well. So everywhere along the river will have it. Okay, well, if there's no questions, then I've got a little announcement for you. From next week, we're going to be trying running these sessions from 7 p.m. instead of 6 p.m. You're the first people to hear that. Honestly, the main reason for it is because I have to rush my dinner every Wednesday so that I can get out in time, and I'd rather not rush. Um, but I have had quite a few people tell me that 6 p.m. is the same for them. It's just a little bit awkward. So we're going to give 7 p.m. a try and see if that works. And yeah, that's about it. Don't forget to have a look on the website. Don't forget to have a look at the courses where you can see the recordings of earlier Zoom calls. Those recordings, by the way, they come with the video, audio, and a transcript and a bonus ebook, which has got recipes and extra information in them. And they're £3 each, just so that I can keep paying the cost of subscribing to Zoom. So have a look. Otherwise, I hope to see you next Wednesday, and keep an eye out for the announcement about the new times, because it'll also have details of what we're looking at next week as well. Thanks very much for coming, and I'll see you soon.